This is from Canto 10 of Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter number 87. So we'll be continuing. Yesterday was session 1, today is session 2. And I will pick up what we'll just do a recap of what we did in session 1, and then we will go into session 2. And so we will still be in the setting the scene, like chapter 1 of Bhagavad Gita, setting the scene. So we are still in the setting the scene part. So yes, we'll all start with Mangal Charan. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Tadati Swapadantikam Vande Aham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalan Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vangsha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyaevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vashadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevayat Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yat Kripatamaham Vande Shri Guru Dinataranam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram. Jai. Prayers of Personified Vedas. And also today is the first day of Purushottam Mas, so we like to give auspiciousness all around this planet Earth in this wonderful month of Purushottam Mas. And I know devotees are doing a lot of penance and austerities. So yeah, all glories. Jai. So we will start with where we left off, just as a recap from session 1. We first discussed how from Brahma came the Omkara, and from the Omkar came out the Vedic knowledge. The Vedic knowledge basically are described in 2 schools. There's the Shruti and then there's the Smriti. And Shruti is generally considered as revealed like prose, like poetry, which are absolute truth. And then the Smritis are more narrative style, and is told by various sages. And then of course we discussed about the Shruti. And we discussed how the Shruti, the primary construct within Shruti are the 4 Vedas, Rig, Sham, Yajur, Atharva. And we also discussed how it is explained that there were actually 4,556 distinct books of Shrutis. When I say Shrutis, I'm specifically talking about the Vedas. And then hardly today only about 4% exist, like hardly 4% exist today. And then in the narrative style, we have the Smritis, and in the Smritis, you have, again, spread of things. And then amongst that, the key thing that we focused on was the Brahma Sutra and the Srimad Bhagavatam. So Brahma Sutra is also termed as Vedanta Sutra. So, same thing, the words are interchanged. But primarily, the Brahma Sutras are what Vyasadeva then coined. And then, of course, he coined most of the books, so we should also mention that. Yeah. So today we'll start on the concept of the lineage, and so the process of this lineage is, while the Vedic knowledge was disseminating down into this sphere of our universe, we have to see the author, or when we say author, the literary author. So maybe that's the better way to present it. That. He was the one who was writing it. Like, he didn't invent it, but instead he was writing it down. He was putting the pen to paper, as they say, the ink on the paper. So it was Vyasadeva. It is actually explained in terms of shlokas that Vyasadeva had written maybe around 500,000 to 600,000 shlokas, like, and all written in palm leaves, And so you can imagine how much hard work it would have been. Like, for us, if you have to go to Office Works to print 100 pages, it's such a big thing. Have to go to Office Works, find parking, then, get things printed. But, in their times, they actually had to, remove the bark tree, the palm leaves, and then, climb the trees, and then, dry up the leaves, and then, ink and write into them. So it was, quite an, arduous task, but they did it. Vyasadeva, and of course, similarly, all the acharyas, they actually did this. So in terms of the lineage, what we'll begin with is we'll first understand Vyasadev's refinement. So Vyasadeva, because he's the literary incarnation, it is actually explained that in this 20th Kalpa, Vyasadeva is actually Vishnu Tattva. So he's actually Vishnu. Right? So he's a Vishnu Tattva, not a Shakti Avesha avatar or a Jeeva Tattva, but he's actually Vishnu Tattva in this 20th Kalpa, the one we are actually in. And so Madhvacharya in Mahabharata Tatparya Nirnaya, which Jeeva Goswami, he reflects in Tattva Sandarbha, Vyasadeva actually, it is clearly explained that Vyasadeva is actually Vishnu Tattva. And the reason why Jeeva Goswami mentions this in Tattva Sandarbha is because he wants to make the point about since Vyasadeva himself is Vishnu Tattva, we should listen to that form of Vyasadeva and see his progression into what he believes is the topmost knowledge. So the first level that we are looking at is Vyasadev's refinement. So the first thing Vyasadeva obviously did was the Shrutis. And then, and so when I use the word first, please don't think first in terms of this was the first book written. First in terms of this was considered topmost. So that's what I mean by first. Like Vyasadeva compiled the Puranas, and then he obviously recompiled them as as he put more narratives into the Puranas. So please don't think when I say first means he wrote this first and that second. So first meaning that this was considered the nectar. So maybe that's what we think of from verse, that this is the nectar. But of course Vyasadeva, when he saw the Shrutis, he felt that it was too what's the right word? It's too phrasy. Sorry, actually not phrasy. Phrasy is not the right word. It was too here and there. Like I think maybe that's the right word. Like in one moment they're saying something, another moment they're saying something else, another moment. So you'll see that in the Shrutis, like if you think of Rigved, when you read it, so one time they'll say Indra is God, then Agni is God, like that. You'll see it's a bit here and there. So in order to bring some structure to it, to put some structure to it, Vyasadeva then wrote the Brahma Sutras. So that, so if you think about his progression of thinking, Vyasadev's. So from Shruti, he wrote Brahma Sutras or the Vedanta Sutras. And it is actually explained that the Vedanta Sutra, the way Vyasadeva would write it is, he would think for some time, and then when he would get one word, he would be, in ecstasy. So you will sometimes see Vedanta Sutra is actually in a phrase format. Atato Brahma Jigyasa. Right? So it's very, what he did was, he took the Shrutis, which were like all prose, and he brought it down to phrases. Atato Brahma Jigyasa. Right? So, the idea of bringing it down to these phrases was, he was trying to summarize all of the knowledge into few words. And actually, as someone who's a Sanskrit scholar, you can understand who is a really good Sanskrit scholar by the way they are able to condense all the knowledge into very simple words. Right? So that is actually considered greatness. Right? So Vyasadeva, the Brahma Sutra, he brings that down. And then later on, when he looks at the Brahma Sutra and he feels that the Brahma Sutra are phrases, but it is still not giving the, it is still not giving the meaning to people on how to live, because they're just phrases, right? You can't live by phrases. You need, a bit more. Then, like for example, when you have the Constitution, you have laws written, like, Section 1, Section 2, Section 3. But in order to enable it, now you need the court system. So while you have the Constitution of any country as a prose format, like as a prose, the functioning of it, that narrative of that is the judicial system. Right? That's the functioning arm. So similarly, looking at the Brahma Sutras, Vyasadeva felt that this is missing the functionality. And so then he compiled Mahabharata. And something very interesting for at least us as devotees to understand is that the Mahabharata that is actually being described, it is actually said that it is probably from a previous kalpa. So that's interesting to understand. Right? That some of the stories in it are from another kalpa. So although we call Mahabharata as an itihasa, means it's historical in nature. Right? There are certain stories in that bypass kalpas. So that is something interesting for us to understand. So then after writing the Mahabharata, what Vyasadeva felt was, by writing this Mahabharata, by writing this narrative version, right, of the sutras, people would understand that everyone should become, like one should come out of the material world and then understand the, Vadanti tat tattva vedas tattva dhyaj jnanam advayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagwaniti sabhyate. To understand the progression of understanding Brahman, understanding Paramatma, eventually understanding Bhagavan, right? Radha Gopinath. But of course, when we enter into Srimad Bhagavatam, the first canto, we see that Vyasadeva is still not happy. He's still agitated. Right? And because to remove this agitation, Narad Muni comes and tells Vyasadeva, the reason you are agitated is you have not simply glorified Bhagavan. Like even in Mahabharata, you have still meandered between Brahmeti, Paramatmeti and Bhagavaniti. You're meandering in that. So you should write a book that focuses only on Bhagavan. And so then came out Srimad Bhagavatam. So that became the topmost composition by Vyasadeva. In Tattva Sandarbha, Jeeva Goswami mentions that sometimes people say that, oh wait, Srimad Bhagavatam was written first and then the Mahabharata was written. Like, that ordering. However, he then goes on to explain that when the Puranas were first written, they were first composed, and then Vyasadeva later on recomposed them. And then Jeeva Goswami gives a big list of references from Shastra to show that Srimad Bhagavatam was the conclusive evidence of Vyasadeva. And so for us, us as being Gaudiya Vaishnavas, right, this Srimad Bhagavatam becomes our juice. It becomes the fulcrum on which our movement revolves, right, the Srimad Bhagavatam. And so then the next layer, so first we see Vyasadev's refinement, right? So Vyasadev's refinement ends in Srimad Bhagavatam. That becomes the topmost conclusion, right? In a narrative form, it has the narrations, it has the sutras, and it has Bhagavan. So it has all three in one, so it becomes the topmost. Then what our acharyas do is, in order to give us vision, so we are coming to the second layering now. So first was Vyasadev's. So now in terms of lineage, so the idea is to show our lineage, right? So to show the lineage. And so then our acharyas, what they do is that they take Srimad Bhagavatam and then they give us references from all other shastras, right? And also give us the what we would call as juice, right? So then first thing we see is Brihad Bhagavatamrita. So Brihad Bhagavatamrita is written by Sanatana Goswami. And this Brihad Bhagavatamrita, it is the juice, the summary of Srimad Bhagavatam. Right? And of course, the word Brihad means big. So it is a big summary. So you could say it's almost an essay, like a thesis. Yes, a thesis is the right word. So it is a thesis of Srimad Bhagavatam, Brihad Bhagavatamrita. And so next, we have Laghu Bhagavatamrita, which is written by Rupa Goswami. So Laghu Bhagavatamrita condenses Brihad Bhagavatam. Right? And so it is explained that Brihad Bhagavatamrita is considered Sambandh Gyan. And so Bhaktividya Pur Maharaj was explaining very nicely that Sambandh Gyan is always voluminous. Because to build relationship, there needs to be volume. Like if you think about Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, because they are working on people's social aspects, so they generate a lot of data. So when Sambandh is there is volume of data. Like it's voluminous. Then Laghu Bhagavatamrita is considered Prayojana. So it is explained that in the process, then you can fine tune it. Right? So when you are learning something, the knowledge is voluminous. Like, when you learn to drive. Like I learned driving very late in my life. So I used to be very worried, okay, how will I drive properly? One time my dad was here in Australia and, we hired a car and then I was driving. And so I was very scared and, one truck would pass by. I'm like, why is the truck here? Why is the truck here? You get worried. And so when you're doing Sambandh Gyan, it's voluminous. But when you get process, now when I drive, I don't think about the truck, bus, nearby. You just drive. So in the process, it becomes less voluminous. So that is Laghu Bhagavatamrita. And then finally, we have, and then after that, we have Jeeva Goswami. He writes the Sat Sandarbhas. So actually, it is explained that Rupa Goswami, who wrote Laghu Bhagavatamrita, he composed 100,000 verses of Sanskrit verses. So equivalent to Mahabharata. Like Mahabharata is 100,000 shlokas, so equivalent. But now Jeeva Goswami, he compiled 400,000 verses. So, like I said, Vyasadeva has compiled about 600,000. So you can imagine Jeeva Goswami's greatness. Right? So he has compiled 400,000 verses. And it is explained that not only did Jeeva Goswami compile 400,000 verses, he also edited, I won't use the word edited, but he copied Rupa Goswami's writings. So he did his own 400,000 plus Rupa Goswami's 400,000 he would write. And so Bhaktividya Pur Maharaj was explaining very nicely in his lecture on Tattva Sandarbha that when Jeeva Goswami would write, this is interesting for at least us as devotees, right? So the way Jeeva Goswami is write, because he's writing on palm leaves, right? So he would write page 1, page 3, page 5, page 7. Then put it out for drying. Okay? And then write the rest of the pages. Then he would flip them and write page 2, page 4, page 6. So you can imagine, when I was hearing that, I was just imagining, wow, this is something. This is a real composer. This is, Kavi. We use the word Kavi, a poet. This is real poet. He remembers exactly what he needs to write and in what order, and he knows exactly how much he needs to write in page 1, in page 2 in page 3. So, that is something, something for us to observe. So then the Sat Sandarbhas is like Tattva Sandarbha. There is, so there are 6 books totaling in this. And I won't go too deep because I want to complete the rest of it. But then we have Vishwanath Chakrabarti Thakur. He writes Bhagavatamrita Kana. So that becomes a summary of even that. So he summarizes all of this in Bhagavatamrita Kana. Now for us, for our sampradaya, for our lineage, for our samstapaka, within our establishment of ISKCON, right? We have the Krishna book, which is Srila Prabhupada's summarization of Bhagavata, right? So that is how we appreciate it, right? So and anytime that is why it is always encouraged that before sleeping one should read Krishna book, because by reading Krishna book one is getting 2 things. One is getting the summary of entire Bhagavatam, and one is also getting firmness in the Samstapakacharya, which is Srila Prabhupada. So both are occurring at the same time. So this forms our lineage in terms of the books. Now one question can be asked, right? And the question that would be asked is, why so much information? Why so many books? Can't it just be simple, right? So I had this slide called information. And the way I want to present this is, I want to first talk about what general class of people are talking today in the material world, in today's time, in 2020. So, recently a documentary came out in Netflix. And this documentary is called The Social Dilemma, right? So the presentation in this documentary, I actually saw this documentary because there was a lot of hype about how this documentary is presenting the problems of today's I heard some knocking of today's modern age. And so this social this dilemma that is being presented in this movie is talking about how we as society we have become very disengaged, and they're talking about this idea about how with the increase of mobile phones there has been a dramatic change in our behavior as humans. So I have put some stats there as well, and then what you can observe from the stats, like some interesting stats, that 56% of people check their smartphones before sleeping. 75% of people, 75% check their smartphone after sleeping. So you put the phone down and you say, now I'm sleeping. And so 75% of those people then go up and pick the phone again. So those numbers, quite amazing. And so of course, within this conversation that is happening in society today, this idea about this information, how this information is, it's isolating society. I like one word that was used in the documentary. They were explaining that how we have, the mobile phone is a digital pacifier. That's a very nice word, right? Digital pacifier. Like kids, you have to give them pacifier. So if they're crying, you just put it in and then they become quiet. So he's saying that this mobile phone is a digital pacifier. Because, you could be a loner, but then you just immediately, put your finger in, you check the phone out and boom, 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 boom. It is interacting with you. So you feel pacified. Oh, you feel nice. And so it was explaining that, with this behavior of humans, what is happening is the suicide rate has dramatically increased amongst people between aged, I think the age group was around 9 to 11. It has increased by more than 50 to 60%, a big jump. So they're saying from 2009, that's when the mobile phone hit your pocket. So from then onwards, they've been tracking this. And so their presentation in this is that, the way we have built this knowledge, it is so enticing, it is so, intriguing to us, that we are forgetting the meaning of real life. See, you're getting the conclusion that they've come to? They're coming that this information is putting us so much into our own bubble that we are not realizing the real world. So while I was watching this documentary, I was just, thinking in terms of how Vyasadeva would have looked at this material world. And this is exactly what Vyasadeva was thinking when he was writing the Shastras. That, and especially in Srimad Bhagavatam, we hear that wonderful shloka, Manda Sumanda Matayo. So he says that, you will be lazy, crazy, everything, like in Kali Yuga. So it is explaining that the reason Vyasadeva then writes this Shastra is to distill the information and to keep it very, fine. So fine meaning, what do you call, primitive. Let's use the word primitive. And when I use the word primitive, I'm not talking primitive from the sense of, it is lacking in intelligence. But primitive in the sense of that's how old, primeval, actually that's the right word. Purana, primeval. This knowledge, he brings this knowledge to the point of the primeval part. Means this knowledge, this Shastra, this Shruti, this Smriti, it functions at the elemental stage of this material world. And so we have to appreciate this knowledge from that angle. Do you know something interesting from what we can understand from Shastra, right? Nowadays what scientists have done is they have these big satellites, and they also have I shouldn't say satellites, they have these big dishes, right, which that send out radio signals, and they also have satellites that send out radio signals. And then, they play some, music and, some, what do you call, like a storybook, like somebody reading a storybook. And they send this noise out into space, hoping that someday some alien will respond back. Like that's the reason they do it. And so the interesting thing was that because we know that the Shrutis are considered absolute truth. So they're even there before the time of the universal creation. So if we were to actually send those mantras out, right, we will see that other aliens will immediately respond to it. So that is how amazing this Vedic knowledge is. That we have the capacity and the capability of conversing with an alien species. So, that is something, at least for us as devotees, to appreciate. Of course, that is not something we want to share to general crowd. So that is first thing. Because, of course, no one will, nobody would believe that, oh, you believe there are aliens, you think you can talk to them, ha, ha, ha. The idea is not to share this knowledge. The idea is for us to understand that if ever there was an alien encounter, then this knowledge can be used, right? And because it's elemental in nature, right? So that is the first thing I understood when I was watching, this social dilemma, this, documentary. The other aspect that I picked up on was they were talking about this, how this, once human beings have all this information, they become self-sustained. Like they don't interact with others. So they're, showing how, young generation kids, they're sitting next to the other person and, they're just on the phone. I forget young generation. I mean, I am old. Right? So I'm old. My generation, even I'm, sitting at the dining table and I have my phone, my wife has her phone, my son's on his tablet. You see? 3 different people. So isolated. And so one thing that we as devotees can, gather from this is that when rishis, right, they would read the Shastra, why they could sit alone in jungles or in mountain tops and just meditate. Because of this, once we get the elemental information, we become Atma Ramas Cha Munayo. You remember that shloka of Srimad Bhagavatam? Was it? I think it's 1:7:12 or 11 or something like that. Like somewhere there. It's in chapter 7 of Canto 1. That's what I remember. But Atma Ramas Cha Munayo. Nirganta. Oh, sorry, I forgot that word. Anyway, I forgot. But it says Atma Ramas Cha Munayo. So the Muni, he becomes Atma Rama. He becomes self-satisfied. And so what happens is when we give people material information, just material information, one becomes self-satisfied. You see this? So imagine what happens when you get spiritual information. You become completely self-satisfied. And the other thing in universities, I like to tell people this in universities so that, they can appreciate that nowadays, we can see people are sitting, by themselves and just, moving their fingers like this. So I tell them that, see, the beauty here is that we are doing this with our thumb. We just have to put a japamala in it and then perfect. See, it's the same thing. The activity is the same. Your thumb, it's the scroll of your thumb, right? They call it the thumb scroll, right? So it's the thumb scroll, that's the beauty. And so you'll start seeing when you distill this information, when you simplify it, how sophisticated is this Vedic system. Sophisticated. Right? It understood that once one gets knowledge, they become self-satisfied. And it also understood that, this ability for the thumb scroll, the need for the thumb to scroll has always been there, and so therefore one must chant. So you see those two things. Right? So that's what I found intriguing when I saw this information. And the reason why I'm presenting this, what's the purpose of presenting this, is sometimes when we may look at all the Shastras and all the books, we may think, why so many books? Because I remember as a kid, I asked my dad, why so many books? Why? So my dad was explaining to me that it's because of this information, it satisfies the soul. And so we can see this in our mobile phone. We are getting, this person went here, this person went there. And we become completely intrigued and, immersed into that. And so once we start reading all the Shastras, we also get immersed into that. You see, it's the same thing. There's no difference. It's just that this is spiritual and this other thing is material. So, that aspect is to be brought up. Now, finally, in terms of the solution, right? So, what happened was in this documentary, they said that, okay, what is the solution to this problem we are facing, right? So, they came up they were saying government needs new regulations, right? People, they should be, ethical in when they're building technology. They should understand ethics, right? And the unfortunate part is in both of these outcomes that they were presenting in this, Hare Krishna, in this documentary was they were talking about artha and then dharma. So what it means is that there was an interview there by a Twitter, he was a vice president, a VP. And this Twitter VP, he was telling that, see, we have to make money, right? You see, artha. So the artha is the first thing that in modern society that we have. We have economy that is first, and then laws or dharma, they are secondary. They are there to support the economy. So while these people were talking about there should be regulation, we should be ethical, while they're discussing this, it is actually not a functional state. It's not something that can function. Because, one example that they were giving in the documentary was now with, he was explaining that if somebody robs your papers, you can go to court, and there are laws to protect your property. But there is no laws to protect your digital property. Your digital identity, where you go digitally, that is not there. So you can see how they are, and the reason why this is the case, like why, laws, and they were explaining that how the property laws cannot be applied to the digital world. Like, there are issues with the way the laws are written. And the problem here is because the laws are written to support economy. The dharma is there to support artha. And so artha keeps changing. Your economic model keeps changing. So the dharma has to keep shifting. And that's why, you need lawyers. Like, traditionally, when I say traditionally means in the Vedic times. So that's what I mean by traditionally. In the Vedic times, if something was wrong, a beggar in the street could go in the court of law and demand justice, and he would get it. But now you need to hire a lawyer. Your lawyer needs to be smarter than the other guy's lawyer, and all of this jig bang has to take place. So actually, the presentation that is given by Vyasadeva in all of this book is that dharma should come first, and then artha. Right? That should be the method. The dharma first, then artha. So first we should have the laws. Then we should have economy. So economy should be subservient to the law. Not that we have economy first, then we build the laws. Right? So that's wild west. Right? There's a gold rush, and then you say, okay, this land is mine now. I occupied this land. So that's the wild west. Now here we are talking about the ancient esoteric East, not the wild west, but the ancient esoteric East of dharma and artha, right? So that is there. So now we will roll back into the question that was asked by Parikhs Maharaj. So Parikhs Maharaj asked the question: how can the Vedas directly describe the supreme absolute truth who cannot be described in words? So now here it is being Parikhs Maharaj he is in ecstasy asking this, that Krishna, he is para, he's beyond. And so, how can we describe him? Like, how is it possible? And so that is his question. And so we see that Sukadeva Goswami, in order to answer this question of Parikshit, right, this idea of this information, because try to understand what Parikshit's question is. Parikshit's question is about information. Right, so they are making all these documentaries nowadays about information. So Parikshit Maharaj has asked this question 5,000 years ago. Right, so, a long time back, he's asking, how do you distill information? Right, information, how do you distill it? How does one distill it? One of the main reasons why I was reading Tattva Sandarbha is I wanted to understand from, what is Jeeva Goswami's presentation of how one understands information, because these things are very nice when you have to go out to universities or you have to talk to, in interfaith. Like, these things are very nice. They're very sweet. And they're very easy to explain to others. Because our acharyas have done all the hard work, collected all the information for us. We simply have to read it and present it. Like, it's that simple. So Parikshit Maharaj is asking the same question about how can something explain tattva if that very thing that is explaining it is limited? Are you understanding his question? His question is, we say, Brahmetmi, Paramatmeti, Bhagwaniti, Sabhyate. This is how Sabhyate, this is how it is to be understood. Right? So when it comes all the way to Bhagavan, the book is actually written in words. So the words are limited. So how is it possible? So Srila Prabhupada, spends a few paragraphs in chapter 87 explaining this question of Parikshit Maharaj. Right? He really dwells into it, like why Parikshit is asking this question. So then Sukadeva Goswami tells that the same question was asked by Narad Muni to Narayana Rishi, Sri Narayana Rishi. And then when Narad Muni asks this very question to Narayana Rishi tells about another incident. When in Janaloka, the 4 Kumaras are sitting along with all of the residents of Janaloka, and this same question arises. And Srila Prabhupada writes something very wonderful in Krishna book about this situation. He says that when this question arises in Janaloka, even the Vedas, they don't know how to answer this question. Isn't that amazing? So even the Vedas, they don't know how to answer this question. So the Vedas are present there in this big assembly. When this question is given, how can the Vedas describe the Supreme Personality of Godhead who's beyond Narayana Para Vyakta? Narayana Paro Vyakta. So he is Para Avyakta. He's beyond even the Brahman. So how can the Vedas explain that? Right? So that question, and Srila Prabhupada writes in Krishna book that the Vedas, they are thinking, how to answer this question? So that's amazing, isn't it? And so at that time, the Kumaras, and from Kumaras, Sanandana, he's chosen to speak. And why he's chosen to speak is, if you remember the journey of the 4 Kumaras, is that they were actually, when they were born, they were complete, Brahmavads. They were completely saying that, okay, material world is illusion, one should merge back to Brahman. So they are completely, Brahmavads, or impersonalists, if you say, impersonalists, right? Complete impersonalists. But then, through smelling the tulsi, right? Through smelling the tulsi in the feet of Lord Narayana, then we see the Kumaras become devotees. So they render service, right? What is the service they rendered? They rendered the service of smelling. This is explained, right? That how Krishna is so attractive through Nama, Rupa, Guna, Leela. So this Nama, Rupa, Guna, Leela, it is explained that in Guna, how Krishna is so attractive in his Guna, then the Kumaras are explained as, see how he attracted the Kumaras through the smell of the tulasi in his lotus feet. So then the Kumaras, because now they have matured in their realization, they come and they explain. And how do they explain? And this is very beautiful. Please see if you can catch this. The way they explain this is say that the Vedas, they are glorifying Lord Vishnu. So you first understand the point that the Vedas are glorifying Lord Vishnu. And to explain this, we go into another story of when the Lord Narayan is awoken by the Vedas. Right? So you can appreciate how this question is going to be unfolded and answered. Okay? So now we go into the aspect of annihilation. Right? So why we are going to the aspect of annihilation is to set the scene of when the Shrutis are glorifying Lord Narayan or Lord Vishnu. Right? So it is explained in Canto 12 of Srimad Bhagavatam that there are 4 types of annihilation. There is the Nitya, there is the Naimitika, there is the Prakrita, and there is Atyantika. Okay? So Nitya is continuous. And so, this is very, so I generally use this a lot in discussing in universities about the continuous annihilation. And so what is this continuous annihilation? It is explained that Brahma, the moment one has a body, the body is dying. Like when the child is born, he says, oh, he's 10 minutes old. So old age has begun, destruction has begun. So that is called Nitya. That is a continuous annihilation. Even down to every cell is destroying. As I'm speaking, my cells are getting, dying and new cells are taking birth. So this is the annihilation. This is the Nitya, the continuous annihilation. Right? Then there is the Naimitika. Naimitika is occasional, and occasional means whenever, one day of Brahma finishes. Right? And the night starts of Brahma. So that is the Naimitika. Then the Prakrita is the elemental. And elemental is when Brahma himself dies. Like when Brahma himself, he gives up his body. Actually, I shouldn't use the word die. I think die is not a right word. I apologize, Krishna. Is when Brahma gives up his body. So at that point, right, that is called Prakriti. That is the elemental destruction. And then Atyantika, now this is the one devotees love the best. And this is described as when a person realizes that he is not material, but he is actually a spirit soul, and he is the eternal devotee of Krishna. At that point, that is the final annihilation. So how beautiful is that, right? And so remember, the concept of annihilation is always to do with the material thing, never with spiritual, right? So that's why in this final annihilation is explained that one has given up all the linkages from this material world and simply surrendered to Krishna. Sarva dharman parityajya mam ekam sharanam vraja aham tvam sarva papebhyo moksha ishyami masucha. That moksha that we are discussing, that is that final annihilation, right? So that's amazing. And so we will just read this translation that we pick up. And the reason why we'll read this is we need to set the scene of how the Shrutis are glorifying. So after one day of Brahma, annihilation occurs during his night. So after one day of Brahma. So one day of Brahma is 1,000 kalpas. Right? So one kalpa is for the Chaturyugas, 1,000 of those. Right? Is the daytime of Brahma. And so then there is a night time, which is another 1,000 kalpas. So after one day of Brahma, annihilation occurs during his night, which is of the same duration. At that time, all the 3 planetary systems are subject to destruction. So we are talking about the Naimitika or the occasional. Okay? So what happens in this? This is called Naimitika or occasional annihilation, during which the original creator, Lord Narayana, lies down upon the bed of Anantasesh and absorbs the entire universe within himself while Lord Brahma sleeps. So it is actually explained here that at that time what happens is the rainfall is so high that the the Garboka ocean, it fills up. And it fills up all the way and leaves only Satya Loka, hovering. So it is explained that, at that time, the residents of Tapaloka, Jana Loka, and even demigods, in some cases, they go all the way up to Brahma Loka. They take a journey all the way up to Satya Loka, and then they all sleep there, along with Brahma. Right? So at this point, like this, just imagine this is how the universe is. That the Garboka ocean, which is, think of it like the embryonic fluid, like, the placenta, right? So this is completely covering the entire Brahmanda, and only at the top a little bit of Satya Loka is left. And meanwhile, we see Lord Vishnu's, Garbhodakshay Vishnu is lying down. Okay? So the next slide, we are now going to talk about the awakening. So this is a very nice picture that I found in Google. And I could only find a black and white version of this, but a very nice picture of Lord Vishnu lying down and everybody present there as he awakens. So, that's a very nice picture. So the first thing is Lord Garbhodakshayi Vishnu, he represents Pradyumna aspect of the Chaturvyuhas. So Srila Prabhupada in describing of chapter 87, he explains about the Amsa, that there are Krishna has many what you call Amsa, but he is the Amsi, like he is the original, right? And so Ete Chamsa Kalaha Pumsa, right? The Pu and Amsa. So Pumsa are the Purusha avatars. So this is what we are describing now are the Purusha avatars. So Ete Chamsa Kala Pumsa. So Srila Prabhupada writes that there are these many what you call Amsas of Krishna. One of them is Garbhodakshahi Vishnu. And Garbhodakshahi Vishnu in the Chaturvyuhas, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, Aniruddha, Vasudev, he represents Pradyumna, right? So he is within every Brahmanda. So Mahavishnu, Karanodakshahi Vishnu, he expands all the Brahmanda. Within each Brahman, within each there is Garbhodakshahi Vishnu. And so Garbhodakshahi Vishnu, he represents Pradyumna. And then it is also explained that he is referred to as Lord Narayan. And why? Because he absorbs the entire universe. So Narayana is Narayana, in whom everyone resides. Okay, so Narayana. So that's very intriguing, isn't it? So he is referred to as Lord Narayana when he absorbs the universe. So when in this in this canto, sometimes you may hear, oh Lord Narayan, we are actually talking about Garbhodakshayi Vishnu. So in terms of the three Vishnus, we are talking about Garbhodakshayi Vishnu, right? But he's also explained as Narayan at this stage because he basically takes in the entire. Not the entire, but he takes in the entire manifestation within a Brahmanda, within one Brahmanda. And so the other thing is at this time, right, when Brahma wakes up. So the first thing is that Brahma has to wake up, right? So when Brahma wakes up, in order for the creation to occur, first we have to get Vishnu to wake up. So in order for Brahma to wake up, Vishnu has to wake up. You see? So although Vishnu is, we say Vishnu is the maintainer, but we have to appreciate, in order for Brahma to create, the maintainer must get up first. And see, this is the beauty, because Krishna is the maintainer of everybody, including Brahma and Shiva. So, that we have to catch that point. And so Vishnu, he is the maintainer. And so in order for Brahma to wake up, first Vishnu has to wake up. And so the Vedas, they are, it is explained that the great Upanishads, so remember we talked about the 4,000, odd, they are all there. And amongst them, 28 varieties. Okay, first the leaders of the Upanishads, right, of the great Upanishads, the leaders are brought forward. And amongst those leaders, then there are 28 varieties that sing these 28 shlokas. So the 28 shlokas we are about to describe are sung by these. And now the interesting thing here is that the Upanishads, right, when they are leading, they are actually people, they are persons, they are personalities. And so one thing for us to understand is that why Srila Prabhupada will say that if anybody gets this book, his life will change. Like why Srila Prabhupada says that is because these books, they are actually persons and they are sakshadhari, like they are they are the literal incarnation of Krishna. So when we are reading Bhagavatam, we have to see that we are actually reading Krishna. Just like it is explained that when we are chanting, we are talking to Krishna. So similarly, when we are reading, we are seeing Krishna. So this is called, through the eyes of knowledge. Jnana Deepena Bhashata, like through the eyes of knowledge, right? So that is our appreciation when we see that these Upanishads are now coming forward and they are trying to awaken Lord Vishnu. Right? And so this is very glorious. Try to appreciate that this is a very glorious moment. And the main thing is, why are they doing this? Like, why are they doing this singing? And Srila Prabhupada writes this very beautifully in chapter 87 of Krishna book. Very beautifully, Srila Prabhupada writes this. Is that the reason the Upanishads are and the Shrutis are asking the Lord Vishnu to wake up is because they want him to give mercy to the fallen conditioned souls. How amazing is that? So that once the material world functions again, there is an opportunities for the the naras to pick up dharma. like to take up the bhakti yoga process. So how sweet is that? And the reason why I bring this out is, I see Ghanshyam Prabhu sends, a lot of pictures of these devotees. They are traveling. They're the traveling Sankirtan Pati, TSKP. So they are going around and they are distributing these books. So one may think that, okay, there's a lockdown, devotees are going out and giving books. He said, but because these books, this is the mood of these books. So we have to understand the mood of the books. Are you understanding the fine point? The mood of the books is that they want the jiva to get elevated. So how amazing is that? That imagine we are reading a book. That book wants us to be elevated. So just imagine, you take a math book. And imagine you pick a math book up and, you suddenly realize that this math book wants you, means me, to become a mathematician. Oh, so how amazing will that book become then? Just imagine the book is talking back. It has the personality, it has that vibrance to do it. So the Upanishads, they have that vibrance. So, that is something for us, when I was reading, Srila Prabhupada's in, that chapter 87, I found that I was like, man, this is amazing. Such an amazing point by Srila Prabhupada, Jayo. It's a really extraordinary point by Srila Prabhupada. I found that very amazing. So, what I was thinking was, now that we have set the entire scene, so we've set the whole scene of this, we will, it is explained that we crack the coconut. So we will read the first shloka. Okay, and of course, in session 3, which is tomorrow, we are going to start with this shloka itself. So I will, re-establish the shloka again. But I thought that, as we end session 2, we must crack into the first shloka, right? So I will first, sing the shloka and then the translation, okay? Shri Shrutaya Uchu Jaya 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 Jam Ajita Dosha Gribhita Gunam Tvamasi Yadatmana Samavaruddha Samasta Bhaga Aga Jagad Okasham Akila Shaktyava Bodhakate Kvachid ajayatmana cha charato nucharena nigama. The Shrutis said, victory, victory to you, O unconquerable one. By your very nature, you are perfectly full in all opulence. Therefore, please defeat the eternal power of illusion, who assumes control over the modes of nature to create difficulties for the conditioned souls. O you who awaken all the energies of the moving and non-moving embodied beings, sometimes the Vedas can recognize you as you sport with your material and spiritual potencies. Whoa, how beautiful, right? Like the poem. So it is explained that the Shrutis, they are singing like bards. Like when the Srila Prabhupada writes so beautifully in Canto 87, that just like when a king sleeps, the singers and the bards, they come, playing, flutes, playing, I don't know, like guitar. I mean, I forgot what it's called. The single string. It is not coming in my head, but those are wonderful instruments. And then they're singing sweetly, glorifying the king and encouraging the king to get up so that the king can do activity. You see the beauty? That we are actually encouraging. So here, Radha Gopinath is asleep. And the devotees, what they do is when they come up in the morning, like I think Bhaja Govinda Prabhu was giving a class on deity worship. So he was explaining, that when the pujaris come in, then they sing mantras to wake the Lord up. So that is the mood, the mood of the bard, waking that, oh Lord, please wake up, save the souls. You see that mood is so amazing, isn't it? Like such a unique mood. So I like that point that Prabhu had made in his talk on deity worship. And so, this same mood that, the Shrutis have in waking Lord Vishnu up, that is the same mood that the devotees of the temple, they have when they wake Radha Gopinath up. Oh, Gopinath. I don't know if devotees are receiving the poetries that I think Ghanshyam Prabhu is sending. I think he has sent maybe 10, I think, so far. or maybe more. I don't remember, but I think he has sent those. I don't know if you're all receiving those poems that are coming out. And so those poems, you will see that there is some on book distribution. When I say it's on book distribution, it's on giving mercy. So that's what I mean, probably, that it's on giving mercy. So, that same mood that, oh Riya Radha Gopinath. So every time when the curtains open, we can take that mood on. And whenever the curtains open, we look at it, say, oh dear Radha Gopinath, you've come here. Please save everybody, including me. Never forget yourself. Including me, please save everyone. So that mood is very amazing. Right? So it's 8:30. I will end here. And like I said, in our session 3, we're going to pick up from the shloka and then we are going to go into each of these shlokas. And so the plan is now going to be, we have 4 sessions left. And so in each session, we'll do 7 shlokas. Like that's the plan. We're going to do 7 shlokas. And through each of the 7 shlokas, we will conclude the 28 shlokas. So 7 4s are 28. See, I can do my math. So that's how we will pick it up. So Hare Krishna, we will end here and then we'll pick it up from session 3. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Bhaktavind ki jai. Nitaya Gaur Premanande Hare Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.